While Russian propaganda regularly reports that another assault has been successfully repulsed and a Leopard 2 and M2 Bradley destroyed in the Robotino area, the situation between Robotino and Verbov itself continues to develop in this location. It was at this location that the Ukrainian defense forces drove a wedge between the two enemy stronghold villages, and in fact reached the second line of defense of the Russian side. At the same time, contrary to all the hopes of the occupants' command, the main efforts were concentrated not on storming the strongholds, but on enveloping and restraining them with consequences. At the same time, the enemy in this area since mid-July began to feel an acute lack of resources. On the dangerous section of the front, the 58th General Army is fighting this wedge with BARS battalions and motorized rifle regiments, and also used the reserve 56th Guards Air Assault Regiment. It is worth noting that the Russian command clearly has no sense of confidence in the new positions, and they are already engaged in pulling back the resource to Novoprokopivka, trying to create some kind of defense line, but it has not been straight for a long time either. The wedge continues to go deeper into the enemy's defenses almost daily. This forced the occupiers to even move their artillery towards the rear of the main defensive line, away from the emerging line of the battle clash, and to send their live forces into counterattacks, in which they are not just worn down, but literally lose combat capability of units, the restoration of which is problematic. Obviously, under such a development of events, Russian troops will be forced to pull additional units into the Zaporizhia region, and they are already beginning to do so. The result of such movements can become and is already becoming weakening of the left bank Kherson region, which was not distinguished by the level of combat effectiveness even before. From all of the above, we can confidently say that the wedge driven between Robotino and Verbov is working, because it does not just cover a separate area, with a certain perspective, but goes beyond it, affecting several bridgeheads at the same time. I also noted earlier that in eastern Ukraine Russia has one of the best groupings in the entire war zone, namely in the occupied Luhansk region, but there is a nuance that needs clarification. The group of enemy troops in the temporarily occupied Luhansk region is indeed one of the best in terms of personnel, equipment and supplies. But only because all other enemy groups in the combat zone are worse than it. It is the best not because it is the best overall, but because the others are doing much worse. In general, the Luhansk branch of the Russian forces, before the offensive of the Ukrainian defense forces, had a defensive potential, but in no way an offensive potential. That is, this entire grouping could hold the defense quite well and for quite a long time, but not offensive. In turn, they were thrown precisely into the offensive. But failure to fulfill their tasks does not exclude terror, mass and large scale, with total destruction of villages and settlements. They will raze everything they can reach, which is why the evacuation of civilians is necessary. And now, a few conclusions that we must draw. 1. What's the result of this offensive over the past month and a half? Second, when you throw troops that are more like for defense into an offensive that does not bring results, how will it end in the long run, for the ability of this group of troops to conduct defensive actions? The conclusions are self-evident. The Russian command has thrown its lemmings into a meat grinder, which may end very predictably for the entire bridgehead, and we understand in whose favor.